By the time my father took me to court, I had already spent most of my life learning how to disappear politely. You learn that in wealthy families, not the dramatic kind from television, the quieter kind, the kind where people stop making eye contact when money enters the room. I was 32, working evening shifts at a restaurant downtown, carrying plates to businessmen who sometimes spoke to me like part of the furniture. I didn't hate the job. It paid my rent. My coworkers were honest with each other. Nobody pretended affection there. But when my grandfather died and left behind an estate worth nearly $11 million, my job became a public argument against my existence, especially to my father. The hearing took place on a gray Tuesday morning in probate court. I remember the smell more than anything. Old paper, stale coffee, damp wool coats drying from rain. My father arrived with two attorneys and the posture of a man who had already rehearsed his victory. He didn't look at me when he walked in. That hurt more than I expected, not because we were close. We weren't. But some part of me still carried the childish belief that public cruelty required private hesitation first. Apparently not. The courtroom wasn't full, but there were enough people there to create an audience. Clerks, junior associates, a few distant relatives pretending they had errands nearby. My father's lawyer argued that my grandfather had been manipulated late in life, that the estate allocation made no logical sense. Most of the money had been placed under structures I controlled directly. I sat quietly through all of it. Then my father finally spoke. "Your Honor," he said, with a small laugh, "she's just a waitress." Something shifted in the room after that. Tiny reactions, smirks. Someone behind me whispered something I couldn't hear completely. The judge leaned back slightly, studying me over his glasses. "A waitress managing millions?" he said. A few people laughed softly. I wish I could say I felt angry in that moment. I didn't. Mostly I felt tired in the old familiar way, like I had somehow returned to every dinner table from my childhood all at once. My father had spent years building a version of me everyone found easy to believe. The disappointing daughter, the quiet one, the one who never applied herself. What nobody ever asked was why I disappeared from the family business at 24, or why my grandfather kept calling me afterward. The judge glanced down at the file again. "Miss Bennett," he said, "can you explain why your grandfather believed you were qualified to oversee these assets?" My attorney looked toward me carefully, as if giving me one last chance to remain silent. Instead, I stood. My hands were steady, which surprised me. "I am the acting manager of Halcyon Private Holdings," I said. The courtroom went still. Even the judge blinked. My father frowned slightly, like he thought he'd misheard me. I continued before fear could catch up. "For the last 6 years, I've managed 3 of my grandfather's private investment entities under legal authorization signed by him and reviewed annually by outside counsel." Nobody laughed now. My attorney handed documents to the clerk. The sound of paper moving across wood suddenly felt incredibly loud. The judge adjusted his posture. My father looked at me for the first time that morning, not as his daughter, as a problem, I explained slowly, not defensively, just factually. My grandfather had stepped away from active management after his second stroke. Publicly, my uncle handled appearances, my father handled relationships, but privately, my grandfather no longer trusted either of them with operational control, so he called me. At first it was small things, reviewing statements, organizing vendor contracts, sitting beside his hospital bed while he asked questions nobody else had patience for, then larger things, wire approvals, access transfers, tax strategy meetings conducted quietly through attorneys who addressed me by title long before my own family ever addressed me with respect. I kept waitressing because my grandfather asked me to. "You think more clearly when nobody bows to you," he once told me. At the time, I thought it was another one of his strange old man philosophies. Later, I understood he was hiding me, or maybe protecting me. The judge spent nearly 20 minutes reviewing documentation in silence. Nobody interrupted him. Finally, he looked toward my father. "These records indicate your daughter has been functioning in a fiduciary capacity for several years," he said carefully. My father's attorney attempted to speak, but the judge raised a hand. "No," he said. "I'd prefer not to hear speculation when documented authorization is sitting directly in front of me." That was the moment control changed, not dramatically. Nobody gasped, nobody stormed out, but the room stopped belonging to my father. You could feel it. The hearing recessed shortly afterward, pending further review. People avoided looking at me as they exited, which somehow felt worse than the laughter. My father caught up with me outside near the courthouse steps. Rain had started again. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. "You let me believe you wasted your life," he finally said. It was such a strange sentence, not an apology, not even anger anymore. Confusion. I looked at him standing there in his expensive coat, suddenly older than he had seemed inside the courtroom. "You never asked what I was doing," I said. He opened his mouth slightly, then stopped, and there it was. Not hatred, not cruelty, just years of mutual silence that had hardened into identity. He looked away first. The case settled 3 months later. Most of the estate remained exactly where my grandfather intended. There was no celebration afterward, no dramatic confrontation, no satisfying speech. I still worked at the restaurant twice a week for several months after the ruling, partly because transition paperwork takes time, partly because I needed somewhere people spoke honestly around me again. One night after closing, my manager asked if the court thing had finally ended. "Mostly," I said. She nodded and handed me a stack of clean glasses to shelve, and for the first time in years, the weight in my chest felt manageable enough to carry quietly.